What's up everyone, it's Endymion, and if you're like me, there's a few things in this world that just tire you out when you hear about them. Pointless reboots, tax season, or watching the news in general and seeing society turn into a twisted hellscape as it crumbles before your eyes. But I would wager there's something worse than all three of these things, and that's how feminism has ruined basically everything. Now I know what you're thinking, a man talking about feminism, isn't that just mansplaining? While all of the above is true, I want to dive in and really try to understand why feminism is so hated by everyone. Why is it such a hot topic, and why is the word feminism so culturally charged? Are men to blame, is it women's faults, or is it something else? And hopefully by the end of this video, you won't hate or want to cancel me. Because a feminist, after all, is someone who fights for women's rights, and as a proud lesbian myself, I do love women quite a bit. So let's begin looking at how feminism ruined everything and what we can do about it, and enjoy some footage of various female characters in media, cause why not? To start, we should probably look at the origins of what the term feminism even means. Originally, there was what we call the first wave of feminism, which started in the late 19th and early 20th century. This first wave came to life around the concept of liberal and social political ideologies that focused on the suffrage of women, with the primary goal being to give women all the rights they need to be equal to men. The second wave came about in the 60s and would last into the 90s with a major push for reproductive rights. And a large part was the passing of the Equal Rights Amendment, which would guarantee the social equality between the sexes. The third wave was far more rebellious in nature and resulted in young feminists embracing their femininity and led to many of the social constructs of the first two waves being challenged by the third. Women during this wave embraced makeup and high heels, for example, heavily, which bewildered the older feminists as embracing these ideas was seen as oppressive by the older generation. Basically, the third wave was women being a lot more independent and kind of sticking a middle finger up to most people and saying we're gonna be comfortable in our own skin. I largely grew up during the second and third waves, so I saw this particular era in full all around me. Then we come to the modern day with fourth wave feminism, which a lot of people would argue kind of destroyed and rewrote a lot of the core principles of the other waves. Thanks to the second and third waves, women had become far more plentiful in leadership roles and were trailblazing across many industries. The fourth wave, however, is where female suppression and the blaming of the patriarchy hit a fever pitch. Suddenly, it wasn't enough to just be equal to men, but instead the movement mutated into the idea of not needing men at all. What started as a righteous cause against the societal limitations put on by men quickly transformed into a radical rebellion. This fourth and current wave of feminism has not only infiltrated every facet of society, but in a lot of ways it's ruined the core values and beliefs that defined it. Feminism went from equality for the genders to the suppression and removal of masculinity. Instead of wanting equal opportunity for everyone, the fourth wave seeks to integrate the unique properties of men into the female persona, effectively erasing the need for men at all. This is why media in general started to portray women as emotionless, robotic killing machines, and largely speaking, many leading female characters are seen as unlikable and, dare I say, masculine as well.
No touching without consent.
If you've ever played a modern video game, you've likely ran into a character or two that fits this bill pretty well. The most obvious recent example is Horizon Forbidden West DLC, The Burning Shores, where Aloy teams up with Seika, and since social media never shuts up about anything, people immediately spoiled that Aloy and Seika fall for one another. This common trope of women not needing the validation of the men around them is increasingly prevalent in today's media. Even when it comes to remakes, you have places like Kotaku that got angry cause Ashley Graham needs to depend on Leon in Resident Evil 4 Remake. Kotaku writer Ashley Bardhan argues in this article that Ashley Graham is more a ghost than a person, with her constantly needing Leon to save her and instead being a damsel in distress for the majority of the game. While it's true Ashley does fit the damsel part within Resi 4's story, it's annoying that Kotaku can't wrap their heads around having a woman who needs help. Ashley is young, likely fresh 18, and goes from living a sheltered life of being the president's daughter to being whisked away to a village crawling with crazy mutated monsters. It's incredibly unrealistic to believe someone regardless of gender being able to survive an environment like this without some sort of special weapons training or prior experience. Ashley being male or female really doesn't matter, and while she starts off helpless, by the end she becomes far more capable. But places like Kotaku of course need every woman to fit the same stereotype, of being the stone-cold emotionless robot that has no time for men, like Aloy is for example. On the TV side, we've had plenty of misfires in the past few years when it comes to showcasing feminism. Batwoman, for example, somehow survived for 3 seasons and starred Kate Kane, the cousin of Bruce Wayne's Batman, who has that ever so infamous line.
I need you to fix his suit.
The suit is literal perfection.
It will be. When it fits a woman.
Which is ironic considering all of her tech, including her suit and more, are simply just Batman's but retrofitted to fit her. Meaning she didn't create anything she uses and just appropriates Bruce's hard work and resources for herself. In a lot of ways, that infamous line and whatever is the perfect example of how fourth wave feminism has ruined a lot of entertainment these days. Women, in the eyes of modern creators, are just better than men in every way apparently. And it's why characters like Rey pissed off so many, since in her apparent new movie she'll be rebuilding the Jedi Order. Which is what Luke was meant to do, but now his purpose and even his last name have been appropriated by Rey the same way Kate does with Bruce's Batman tech. A lot of these female characters are simply lazy gender-swapped versions of legacy male characters without any of the nuances or flaws. Even back in 2022, TheGamer.com outright demanded that the new Lara Croft needs to be a lesbian. While I understand representation matters and all that, isn't it weirdly condescending and pandering to have every female hero be gay? It's yet another weird example of that fourth wave logic crawling its way to repurpose anything they can get their hands on to fit their ideals. Look, having female characters be gay is totally fine, but there has to be a point where it goes from being naturally included to obviously pandering. A good example is Vi in Arcane, whom I thought was a good character with a solid arc that felt naturally implemented when it came to her sexuality. Even me, a raging lesbian, thought Vi was just great all around. Another example that felt right and not that forced was Negasonic Teenage Warhead in the Deadpool movies. It's not only said outright, but it's also used for laughs, which is cool. But due to this weird fourth wave all-encompassing every female character must be gay movement, it's no longer surprising or special if a female character is gay. At this point, it's basically expected, and if I were to compare it, having a female character be gay these days is about as common as the head-shaven space marine stereotype from the early 2010s. In fact, that's exactly what this new main character archetype feels like. Back then, you couldn't look anywhere without seeing a game that starred a bald-headed space marine during that time period, and the same is happening now. I mean, at some point, the Uncharted series will also continue, and in the last game, Nate and Elena have a daughter. And I guarantee you that whenever that inevitable Uncharted reboot happens with their daughter taking the leading role, she will be accompanied by some industry person of color sidekick and she will 100% be gay. In fact, if their daughter ends up not being gay, that would actually be subverting expectations in every way, but I guarantee you she will be. This is why when it came to Jedi Survivor, which I recently completed, I found Cal and Merrin falling for one another to feel so weird in a modern video game. Because the rarity of seeing a heterosexual relationship in a AAA game felt weirdly alien in today's world. Of course, some subscribers have told me that Merrin is pansexual apparently, but regardless, Respawn Entertainment shipping her with Cal was huge. Because they could have easily had made her gay and had articles written for internet clout that they're oh so inclusive and whatever. In a lot of ways, what fourth wave feminism has done to media at large is make it far less interesting or special when we see strong female characters. I remember back when The Last of Us had their DLC release and Ellie kisses Riley and the internet exploded. Because back in 2013 that wasn't the norm and Ellie being gay was a huge win for feminism and all that. And Aloy kissing Seika just felt like Guerrilla Games trying to emulate Ellie and Riley's moment again. But the reason why it didn't land as hard is because Aloy is boring as hell and Ellie is by far a much more interesting character than her. But nowadays is not special anymore since Ellie, Batwoman, Aloy, and so many others are just the latest head-shaven space marines of today. But this is what feminism has done. It has successfully integrated the belief that in order for a woman to be strong, she needs to reject her feelings and never want a man. But in terms of realistic consequences, we just gotta look at the latest data about the dating world right now. There's tons of articles these days citing surveys and data that shows women are staying single at a staggering rate. According to Wells Fargo Economics, roughly 52% of American women are single or separated, and 46% of all genders combined are single as well. Meaning almost half of the people in America don't have anyone. I know some might see that as a win, but in my eyes, that's just sad. Then there's this infamous article from January 2023 which states 45% of women will be single and childless by 2030, with that percentage rising by 1.2% every year. According to Morgan Stanley, this percentage rate is for women that are deemed in the prime working stage of their life, which is the ages of 25 to 44. According to the article, single women spend more than the average household alone between eating out, buying things they want, and traveling. And while this huge boost in women working is good for the economy, it's going to cripple future generations due to reduced birth rates. And while many will look at this news as good, it's simply masking a far more growing problem underneath. While women are more single and independent, so is the rise of mental illness, with the majority of women these days being on some type of antidepressant or anxiety medication. Not to mention that according to data within evmagazine.com sources here, being single with no children can actually increase the risk of heart disease due to prolonged loneliness. And in the case of men, being lonely with no children can reduce the average man's life expectancy by 10 years. Single individuals are also 2.5 times more likely to go to a nursing home when they're older, and when admitted to hospitals for treatment, single people fare far worse than those with someone in their life. Single patients apparently have increased hospital visits, higher medical bills, and stay sicker for longer. And single people report more debilitating illnesses than those who have someone. Basically, as wild or as outlandish as it sounds to some, being single for too long is actually bad for you. Humans are social creatures, of course, and while being by yourself for a little is totally fine and understandable, longer periods of loneliness can do a number on your mental and physical health. Basically, being lonely can and will slowly kill you. And when it comes to married men, for example, they are far less likely to drive while drunk or get into altercations with the law. Of course, there's always going to be exceptions to the rule, but when a man has actual purpose, he controls and values himself more, which is no surprise really. In general, married people usually have better mental health as well, since they have someone to talk to and share their feelings with. I don't want to spend too long going into every statistic, of course, but the truth remains that ideologies like feminism have not only changed how modern women think, it's slowly killing them too. Of course, you could argue there's plenty of married couples out there suffering too, which is also true. Which is why it's super important to find someone you don't want to smother in their sleep to be your partner. But even I can attest, as someone who was single for a long time, I was kind of miserable. I started consuming more content that was largely feeding into my stigma, and thankfully I was able to pull myself out of it and leave it behind. And by content, I mean like manosphere stuff. I look at that kind of content now and I cringe at a lot of it. Seriously, if a guy needs to tell you they're an alpha male, yeah, they probably are, and let's be honest. But now that I'm in a relationship, I'm not as selfish, and that's cool. Of course, everyone is different and we're all at varying stages of life, but for every positive bonus that feminism has brought, it's also as if it takes more than it gives. As you can tell in this video, I'm going over a lot of things when it comes to how feminism has shaped the modern world. Video games, movies, and TV are worse because feminism has pushed writers and producers to make the same archetype of female character. We can't have loving, emotional, caring female heroes anymore. They're all just Batman without the cape, and the emotional range of Kirsten Stewart's face. And of course, there's the joke that a lot of women put way too much faith into things like astrology when it comes to their daily lives.
Saturn Edge is ruining my day.
One female character I like that nobody else seems to like is Abby from The Last of Us. While a very obvious strong female character, Abby goes through a lot, and there's plenty of moments throughout the story where she's tested and doesn't come out on top. I think when it comes to the strong female character archetype, Abby is one of the better examples in my opinion. Then I look at someone like Aloy and all I can see is the Terminator wearing a skin suit. It's all very surface level. And these days, fourth wave feminism has largely turned many women into being like Aloy, emotionless, uncaring, and oftentimes indifferent to the world around them. While manosphere nonsense and alpha male snake oil salesmen have led many men astray. And don't worry, I'll get into that stuff in a future video someday, but modern feminism has turned women into robots. Of course, not all women or men are like that, and obviously I will have some bias. But as a proud lesbian straight man myself who loves and is attracted to women, it's worrying to see how feminism has ruined so many things. Feminism at its core completely transformed the modern world for better and worse reasons. Women are more independent, but they're also very lonely and mentally unwell. You hear arguments like, well, the world is overpopulated, but that's really only true if you live in China or India. If you live in Canada, for example, it's actually heavily underpopulated, and the same can be said about many first world countries. The pursuit for a better life via the teachings of modern feminism has traded the future of society for the conveniences of the right now. We're slowly but surely heading straight into a cold future where everyone will be lonely, no one will own anything, and yet we're all just supposed to pretend to be happy. Maybe a fifth wave will come that can hopefully rectify the sins of the past, but there needs to be a future generation in order for that wave to come in the first place. And finally, we come to the question, who is to blame for all of this? Men, women? The true answer would be most likely to say the government itself. To sum it up quickly so this video doesn't drag on too long, basically men were taxed back in the day by the government, but women largely weren't because they didn't work. So when women rose up and gained independence, they also got jobs, which meant they could be taxed. Which means the government could make more money, and voila, now the governments of the world had twice as many workers. And by the slight use of propaganda with slogans like "we can do it," that emboldened women during war times to take up jobs that were primarily for men. And thus, through activism and marketing, the government essentially willed the working woman into existence and profited on their newfound independence. But like any movement, there are positives and negatives, but as feminism-centric movements continue to push the stability of the world, it also shifts. There is an argument to be made that many men today are simply not operating at their full capacity, and the reason women are single so much is because they can't find suitable partners. And while I agree there are a lot of lost men out there, it does seem like due to feminism, a lot of women have wildly unrealistic expectations as well. But it's a scary future where the men are being feminized by the media and the women are becoming more masculine. To say society has its ass on backwards would be an understatement, and I don't even want to get into the whole gender argument as that's a whole other can of worms. But it can't be understated that modern fourth wave feminism has completely changed the trajectory and concept of a woman's place in the world. While I personally don't believe every woman can or should be a mother, the stark divide between those who want children and don't is concerning to say the least. But the argument can also be made that due to how lost many men are today, would they even be good fathers to begin with? Like I said, I'll explore that potentially in a future video. But I think the greatest mistake feminism has done to women today is convince them that men are their enemy, that somehow the very concept of a man is the biggest threat to all of your goals. The sobering reality that I hope more people realize before it's too late is that we need each other. I'm not going to sit here like the proud lesbian I am and not admit that I need women. I do. There are a lot of things in life I can't do or viewpoints I can never understand if not for women. The amount of times my girlfriend or mom has pointed something out to me that I would never see without them is insane. I grind so much on YouTube that I often can't see the forest from the trees, but my girlfriend will tell me that I should slow down and celebrate every win and really be proud of how far I've come. But as a man, all I can think about is that my value is based on what I can provide, what resources I can hoard, so I can be deemed valuable. But sometimes what it really takes isn't the money or the views or whatever else, but to slow down and understand to appreciate each tree within the forest, otherwise what's the point? And I wouldn't have realized that if not for her. And I truly believe that what modern feminism teaches women is that you don't need men when in fact it's the opposite. We all need each other. We need to stop building up these walls and kicking each other down and constantly trying to outperform one another. We're all gonna die one day, even Keanu Reeves will die one day, which is kind of sad when you think about it. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is that life is too fragile and short to always be so hateful and to constantly be looking for reasons to vilify others. So the biggest lie modern feminism has done to the world at large is lie and say we don't need one another to survive. Maybe when that fifth wave comes, it will change from we don't need men to we need each other. Otherwise, there won't be anyone left. So in the end, be kind to yourselves, reach out to someone if you're feeling down, and stop vilifying entire genders of people because of what some stupid ideology told you to think. So I guess what I want to say in the end is to stop moving so fast and slow down so you can appreciate what's around you. The world may not be perfect, but it's the only one we got, and while feminism has in some way ruined everything, it doesn't mean we can't fix what's been broken. So stop, listen, and learn, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.